This is Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Carrie Ann Williams. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Massachusetts, and this is a podcast that's about everything related to mental wellness in the Black community and beyond. And for today's podcast, I have a guest with me, so I'm going to add her to the podcast now. So, as my guest today, I have Zee Clarke, who's a Harvard MBA that went from leading teams at Fortune 500 companies and startups in Silicon Valley to teaching mindfulness and breathwork to people of color. And why is this? After experiencing a number of race-related challenges, from racial profiling and harassment by the police to microaggressions in the workplace, she realized that mindfulness and breathwork were much more powerful outside of the yoga studio and in the context of our everyday lives. Trained in India, Zee leverages her toolkit of yoga, meditation, breathwork, sound healing, and Reiki to ensure that all people of color have the tools to thrive despite any challenges that race, gender, or sexuality might present. And Zee has been featured in CNBC, Essence, and more. So welcome to the podcast, Zee Clarke.
Thank you so much, Carrie Ann. It is so nice to be here with you today.
So tell us a little bit about your story and some of the race-related challenges that you had.
Yeah, I've had an unusual journey and path, but I will start from the very beginning. I grew up in Washington, D.C., in a predominantly Black, low-income neighborhood. And when I was 8 years old, I got a scholarship to attend a very fancy, prestigious private school in the suburbs. And so I'll say that the beginnings of my journey started on the first day of school, when I realized that I was the only Black person in the room, when I realized that I was the only person that's family had financial issues, and I felt completely out of place and nobody spoke to me. And that was like the beginning, me at 8 years old, like alone in the playground during recess. It was like very emotionally challenging. And I'll say that being the only, whether it was in eighth grade, when I was 8 years old, or even in my career in the workplace, that has always been the case. Mm-hmm. And so, I went to Harvard for undergrad. I went to Harvard Business School. And afterwards, I started a career in Silicon Valley. And in Silicon Valley, I would often be the only woman in the room, the only Black person in the room, sometimes the only Black woman in the entire company. And that comes with its challenges, particularly around microaggressions. So basically, people will say things that are offensive. They will treat me differently than other people. For example, I remember the first day on a job, somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, are you the new diversity hire?" And I'm like, okay, if I didn't apply for the role of diversity hire. Right? But also just like watching people get promoted a lot faster than me. I mean, I remember one time, one particular role, my boss had left. So I was doing my boss's job. I was running the team. And I asked my boss, the head of the company, actually, I said, "Hey, I've been doing my old boss's job for 6 months now. I think I'm doing a pretty good job. Look at all of the data, look at the performance. I believe that I deserve the promotion of the job that I'm already doing." And he said, "Oh, you're doing a great job. You are right. You do deserve it. But I'm really sorry. We can't really do it right now. So how about you change your title on LinkedIn so that clients will," because I told him that we were losing business as a result of my lower title, which is true. So he's like, "So that we can keep the business." But that meant that I had a fake title. I was getting paid the lower title amount, right? So just because it's like unfair treatment in the workplace, also challenging. And then also when you're the only Black person, I feel like, and a lot of Black people will say, and you might agree with this, we got to work twice as hard just to be treated like everybody else. And when you're the only, the pressure is on because people are looking at you, they're judging you, and you wonder, are they going to hire another Black person if I mess up? And so that caused a lot of stress. I wasn't sleeping. I was working nights. I was working weekends, really trying to prove that I belonged to be where I was. And that ultimately led to burnout. And so at a certain point, my doctors were like, "Something's got to change. You need to do something about your stress levels." And that's when I decided I can't live like this anymore. So I quit. And a lot of people were like, "You just quit? Like you're not going to do anything?" And I was like, "I need to take care of myself." So I went to India. And I joke that I did the Black girl version of Eat, Pray, Love. I was doing the yoga, and that's where I learned breath work. And I realized that the breath could actually have so much power over how I feel. And so I
Mhm.
started to use these practices kind of when I would experience racism, whether that was at work or kind of in everyday life. You're shopping, you're at the airport, you're on vacation, and a lot of really scary things happen. Sometimes it feels dangerous, right? When the police get involved, when you might be, sometimes I love nature, right? I love nature is so healing for me. And so I'll go to places, and I have friends that'll be like, Black people don't hike, right? I grew up DC. Being someone I was like, Black people don't hike. And I find it so healing. And
Yeah.
a lot of those places, there are no Black people. And sometimes things happen. Like one trip, somebody wrote "F-U," okay, the full word, on my car at an Airbnb mountain cabin. And I
Oh,
didn't know whether I should stay the night, right? Like that's
yeah,
scary
yeah.
in the middle of nowhere. So anyway, the point is breathing practices have been so powerful and helpful for me in these moments of fear, of anxiety, and all of the emotions that come with racism.
Wow. I mean, I think about there are so many aspects of your journey that so many of us share. People, the microaggressions, people kind of making comments, and sometimes it's flat out aggression. Like,
Yeah.
are you a diversity hire? That's just flat out aggression. That's really plain. And just kind of the sense of people not recognizing value, kind of just having an idea of their mind of where you belong, and that this is you're kind of not ready for this other position and things like that, and kind of how do you deal with the emotion, the experience related to these experiences, and the path that you found, and you've wanted to share it with other people because it's been so helpful for you. I wanted to kind of start with this idea of breath work, because I think it's a concept that can be a little bit baffling in the sense, well, breathing, isn't breathing something that we all do? And people say, well, take a deep breath. Well, I've tried taking a deep breath, it doesn't help. What is breath work, and how does it affect the body?
Yeah. So you are so right. We all breathe every day. We breathe naturally. But you might notice that when things happen, your breathing patterns change. So, for example, let's say that you get stopped by the police, traffic stop, right? And you know that moment when you are waiting for them to come up to the side of your car? They make you wait it feels like a really long time. And in those moments, like my heart rate's like, oh, it's like beating so fast. And my breath gets a lot quicker and shorter, more, shallow breathing, right? And so that's our nervous system kind of kicking in there, particularly our sympathetic nervous system. So our sympathetic nervous system, our fight, flight, or freeze reaction, when we believe that we are under attack in some way, it could be emotionally, it could be physically. And then our sympathetic nervous system is doing that to our body, the heart rate, the fast breath. And so breath work is using the breath with intention, breathing in particular patterns, like very conscientiously, in order to kind of counter that, in this case, sympathetic nervous system, in order to stimulate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest nervous system. And so if you breathe in certain ways, it can allow you to calm down and just take a deep breath. If you just do that one time, that might not do it. But what I learned in India is that there are breathing practices that have been done for thousands of years. Yoga, and I learned this in yoga teacher training in India, right? So I went there to do yoga, and in the States, yoga tends to be predominantly white women, right? There's exceptions here and there. And I will say that I'll use the word cultural misappropriation has kind of redefined what yoga is in the States to exercise, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so a lot of people just think it's the asana, the physical postures, like that's what yoga is. But yoga is so much more than that. And the breath is the core of this. That's prana, that's energy, right? And so it's breathing in particular ways in order to manage whatever might be going on with you. So I talk about the breath as medicine. Just like you might go and get some Advil when you have a headache, there are particular breathing practices based on how you're feeling. So, for example, I told you the story about FU on my car at this mountain cabin. Well, I couldn't go to sleep. I could not sleep. My friend and I decided to stay, even though we were like, are they going to come back? What's going to happen? I don't know. Do these people have guns? There's like an open carry law in this state. Like, right. And I couldn't sleep. I just could not fall asleep. And that's when I did the 4-7-8 breathing practice. That's when you inhale for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 7, and then you exhale for a count of 8. And there are now lots of research studies that show that that calms your anxiety. It stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system if you do it just for a couple minutes. And so the breath can actually help you depending on how you're feeling. And so the first step is identifying, how am I feeling? Am I tired? Am I anxious? Am I angry? Am I triggered? And then there's certain breathing techniques that you can do to make yourself feel better in those situations.
So start off with first acknowledging and identifying your feelings,
Yes.
but also then kind of using your breath with intention to kind of serve a particular purpose. So it's not just breathing to live, but it's breathing to regulate your nervous system.
Yes,
To lead to calmness.
Mm.
And in that calm state, as you mentioned, so you mentioned that when you are in that kind of fight flight state, your breathing patterns change, it becomes more shallow, your heart is racing. And if you're able to use your breath with intention to trigger the resting nervous state, then you're no longer in fight flight mode. And I imagine that that would kind of help to kind of make you think more clearly, because when we're in fight flight mode, how we think differently than when we're in resting mode, in terms of problem solving and that sort of thing, but also then how you feel.
Exactly. Exactly. And one thing that I want to comment on is there's in the specific moment, right? Like when you're triggered, when something happens. But let's talk about the long-term impact of constantly being triggered. When we experience microaggressions on a daily basis, we are constantly on high alert. And that is actually really bad for our long-term health. So, you look at statistics and Black people have the highest rates of high blood pressure and heart disease. And now medical research shows that it is a direct result of racism and discrimination. And so if we do not do something intentionally to take care of ourselves, we're going to have accelerated deaths, right? These just just killing us like, small cuts by small cuts, right? Death by 1,000 cuts.
So this is particularly relevant for us in the Black community.
Yes. Because, it's chronic stress, right? This causes chronic stress. And when I was doing research on, what are the symptoms of chronic stress? Sure, there was high blood pressure and heart disease, but diabetes was on that list. Accelerated aging was on that list. Dr. Martin Luther King was 39 when he passed. The autopsy said he had a heart of a 60-year-old, right?
Wow.
It can cause you to eat more, right? Substance abuse, so many things as a result of chronic stress because of racism. And so that's where the breathing comes in so that we can prevent that when these things happen, because I hope that the world changes, but it is slow.
Wow. I feel like there's just so much kind of power packed into that, what you just said right there. Thinking about the accelerated aging that comes from the chronic stress and how there is research evidence for this in the Black community. Thinking about the substance use and how sometimes the way that these things start they have different origins, but for some people, it is coping. It's kind of a way of kind of dealing with the stress and handling the stress. And in fact, some time ago, I spoke with someone who had developed a model for recovery. It incorporated the breath. And it was just so interesting to kind of think about that. I'm not sure why I'm not remembering her name now, but it's in a previous podcast for those of you listening. It's in my summer series. It's called How to Recover from Addiction. So you can look that up. But in the first month, it's kind of about this idea of the breath and using the breath with intention and how that can help people as they're trying to get in touch with their bodies, as they're thinking about how cravings affect them, how the addiction affects them. And kind of talking about what's sometimes missing from other recovery models, but that was kind of a separate argument. But thinking about substance use in the Black community and some of the historical kind of beginnings of that, definitely relevant for us.
Yeah, I have two dear friends, like best friends in life that passed, one at age 33 and the other at age 37, and both from substance abuse, and both because of the challenges of their lives, right? Challenges of being Black in America. You know, one of them is actually also Black and queer, right? The challenges of being Black and queer in America. And it's like sometimes it just feels like too much. Sometimes it's just so hard, right? I mean, even like the year 2020, right? And just constantly, I mean, look, it's not just 2020, all the years prior, but like watching our people get murdered on television. And that is trauma right there. You can be traumatized, just PTSD from watching one incident. And, you know, I can't remember the statistic right now, but it said something along the lines of the people in the state of, you know, police brutality, murder, that the Black people in that state have worse mental health for 3 months. Okay, that was the study. Now imagine the study was in the state, but imagine if it's you see one after another, it builds up. And all of that gets stored in the body, you know, and you were talking about addiction and that people are paying attention to their body. Well, you know, a lot, they say, I love this phrase. I can't remember who said it to me, but I say it now all the time. The issues are in the tissues. You know, something happens and you feel it in your gut, like you got punched in the stomach, or sometimes you have that thing in your throat. And so the breath can help loosen up those tight muscles that, you know, have been caused by life.
The issues are in the tissues. so, so now, some of the work that you've done, and all the things that you've learned, have kind of led you to write a book. And so I want to learn a little bit more about your book, what it's about, why you wrote it, what can people expect from it, when is it going to be available?
Yeah. This is where the book came from. I was tired of hearing, I can't breathe. I kept hearing, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And I'm sitting here being like, the breath has saved my life, you know? And it's like, we can breathe. We do breathe. We will breathe. And after learning all of these breathing practices and really realizing that these breathing practices were so helpful to me when all these terrible things happened to us, I wanted to share these tools with the Black community because I grew up thinking yoga, and not that this is yoga, I mean, this is a part of yoga, but I grew up thinking that yoga was for white people. I just, the Black people don't do that. I mean, you grow up in DC, I don't know. I also, you know, I hiking. I was like, what? So a lot of things I got introduced to later in life. But this book, every chapter is a situation that happens to Black people. And I share stories of what happened to me that relates to that topic. And then I share mindfulness and breathing practices related to it. So here's an example. Shopping while Black is one of the chapters. And I share a story of when I went to the grocery store. I spent $220 in the grocery store, and a grocery store employee called the police and said that I stole deli meat. Now, here's the thing. I'm a vegan. Okay. So the police came and they searched my whole car, and I was going on a cross-country road trip to national parks across the, you know, and so I had a very full car filled with lots of stuff. They went through every bag, my sleeping bag on the concrete, my hiking poles, my, you know, my clothes, like everything was all over the place as they were searching for the meat. This is after I had showed them the receipt and then explained to them different vegetables. They were like, what's this? And I was like, that's an English cucumber. What's that, right? So I share stories of like what can happen to us, in this case, racial profiling. And then I share breathing techniques that you can do when you're in that situation. You know, another example is safety is a privilege. And I share stories about times when I didn't feel very safe and what I did to kind of calm myself, or that's not my name. Now, Carrie Ann, yours is a little bit more straightforward. So, but you know, in the life, right? People, they just don't know. They don't know what to do. And so often people will either pronounce your name wrong, and when you correct them, they don't care. They just say it wrong all the time. Or they just change your name and they'll be like, actually, I'm just going to call you blah, blah, blah. Right. And it's like, Really? And so anyway, so I share stories of things that happen to Black people. The only is another chapter, RESPECT at work and all the microaggressions at work, to code switch or not to code switch. And so for Black people, and this book was written for Black people, like I want Black people to have these tools. And what this does is it will empower you the next time something terrible happens, right? And because you'll know, oh, if I do a belly breath right now, I can calm down. Something happened this week, and I don't know if you heard this, but at a historically Black college, a girl, the professor, a white professor, said to this 20-year-old girl that she needed to like redo her essay or something. Like it was like, correct something, and she didn't think there was anything wrong with it, so she said she wasn't going to correct it. And so she showed up to class for a group presentation because she didn't want to like leave her group, let her group down. And the professor told her that she needed to leave, that she should apologize, and that she needed to leave, and that she should apologize. Well, she refused to apologize. And so then she got worked up, right? Because she wasn't taking any belly breaths. She got triggered by the white professor who, in her mind, was trying to embarrass her in front of all of her classmates. And so that professor called the police. So the police showed up in the classroom. Okay. And so now she's like yelling. There's all over the internet, right? She's like yelling. She's cussing people out because her sympathetic nervous system was telling, she's under attack. She needs to protect herself. And ultimately she was arrested, right? Disorderly conduct. And now obviously the professor was in the wrong, but also because her nervous system felt like it was being attacked, she was acting a certain way. And it's not like it's just a challenging, charged situation. But the point is that if we as Black people know that we have control over how we feel, and that these people, whatever they might do to us, they cannot control us and what's inside. We can't control what's on the outside, but we can control what's on the inside. And so that's what this book is about. It is about tools that you can use in order to deal with the challenges that we face.
And that seems like totally makes sense, because it's not an excuse for putting up with racial injustice. It is a tool that you can use to fight racial injustice, but using all your, again, the problem solving skills that you have from thinking rationally before it spirals into a disorderly conduct charge. How can you kind of fight for yourself while all your systems are online? Because in that situation, I never saw the video, but it sounds like that's a situation where at that point, the idea of who's wrong and who's right got lost in all the behavior and the police and everybody in the whole class getting disrupted. And was there a better way to solve the problem of the professor kind of, making these demands? And if she had been able to kind of help to shift herself out of fight flight mode, she might have been able to come up with a different solution that may have been more effective than her having a charge with the police.
Exactly. And so, Audre Lorde has a quote that is, what is it like? Self-care is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation.
Yes.
And that is an act of political warfare, right?
Yes.
So this is about self-preservation. The breathing practices, it's because we don't know when all the racism and the biases are going to change. But while we wait, might as well take care of ourselves.
And it's so accessible, right? This costs nothing in the sense that you can use these practices wherever it's with you. It's on the go. It probably takes very little time. People around you might not even know that you're doing it. They can't see you doing it. So it's not, like you're doing a yoga handstand. You're just controlling your breath, and you are counting silently, or, whatever the practice may be.
Yes.
So it seems like it's so accessible, and it seems like the kind of book that people need. It's an investment. You'll buy this, and then you have these practices that you can take with you that could change your life.
Yes, exactly. And, this isn't the type of book that you read once and you leave on the shelf. For me, this is like the thing that you go back to when something happens. And, my last chapter, I actually reframe all of the techniques in terms of how you're feeling. So while the book is structured by these different situations, you could just go to that last chapter and be like, I am angry. Where is the anger release breath? Or I am frustrated. Where is the breath for that? So it's an ongoing process of self-care as things happen.
Wow. And what I like about it too is that and people can do this on their own. I mean, of course, this is in combination with all the other solutions that are out there, and people should see the solutions that they need. But this isn't, this adds to that. There's something that you can do for yourself.
Yes.
It's pretty simple to kind of to access, which I like that, because there's a need for access for for tools that people can use to help themselves. There's definitely a need for that.
Totally. Yes. And the part that it's free, like that's what like blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute. I could just do this on my own. And now sometimes when you're new to things, you might want a guide. So I do have a YouTube channel that has guided practices based on, and you could look up like Zee Clarke anxiety or Zee Clarke stress relief or anger or whatever. And so that is also helpful, just because sometimes when it's the first time, you want somebody to do it with you. And again, these only take like 2 or 3 minutes max. And the other point that you made about you can do it in front of people, there are so many times at work, in the workplace specifically, where I am doing belly breaths because somebody said something to me like, oh my God, one that just comes to mind right now is, when I see you, I don't see color.
So sweet.
Like, you don't see color. I see, in my brain, in my mind, I'm like, I'm black. I see that I'm black. I don't have a problem with that. You're the one that wants to ignore that. Like, really? But instead, I take a belly breath. And I'm just like, oh, well, that's interesting. But I am black though. And I love that I'm black. I love my smile.
Like, there's nothing wrong with the color. What do you, So this book is coming out in March.
Yes.
And where can people order the book?
So Black People Breathe, coming out in March of 2023, and it is now available for pre-order. So it's available wherever books are sold. I mean, Amazon or the independent bookstores. It's already out and about. So you could order it today and then it would arrive on March 14th. Yeah.
All right. So I'll definitely be looking out for that. I think that's going to be a helpful resource. Even for me as a podcaster, kind of thinking through, as people ask me questions, I can always refer them to different things in the book. So I think I'll be looking out for that. And as we kind of have had such a great discussion, and I know that this is kind of you're in the wellness space, I wanted you to give our listeners just kind of 5 tips that they can take with them as they go along their day today. What are some of your top 5 tips for just, for wellness in the Black community?
Yeah. Okay. Tip number 1, a daily check-in. What do I mean? For me, it's in the morning and I say, good morning, Zee, how are you doing? I use my name because somehow there's less that third party separation. It allows me to feel kind of taken care of by myself, but also checking in the morning to see how you're doing. Then you can decide, that kind of can influence the rest of your day. So for example, if you're like, I'm really tired today, I'm like more tired than ever. Okay, well, your really long to-do list, is there anything that's not urgent that you could take off of it, Or if you're like, I'm feeling energized, I'm like ready, you're like, oh, I'm going to do those extra projects today, Or if you are sad, then maybe today is a day that you make a phone call to a person that is going to be comforting. So daily check-in every single day, ask yourself, how, good morning, Zee, how are you doing? Or just, how am I doing? Okay. That's number 1. Number 2, be intentional about your morning and evening routines. So let me tell you about the former me. It wasn't a good look. Okay. I would have my phone as my alarm clock. So my phone would ding and then I'd pick up my phone. I'm lying in bed. And next thing you know, I'm scrolling on Instagram for way too long. Then I check my work email. Then I see a work email that's upsetting. Then I start writing back from bed, like triggered without even had time to wake up, and then I'm late. I get in the shower. I don't have time for breakfast. I'm kind of discombobulated, get my keys. I go to work, right? And then in the evening, I'm so tired from work. And I used to just be like, okay, I just want a glass of wine. And then I have another glass of wine. And then maybe a third. And then, I watch TV. And then the next thing I'm like passed out on the couch, right? Like not again. And then the next, and it repeats itself. Terrible, terrible. And so I invite everybody to look at what are your morning and evening routines today. Maybe you're not as bad as I used to be. But here's the question. If you were to be intentional, what might you change? And so for me, getting rid of my phone in my bedroom was the biggest, most important thing that I did differently. And I also then created like a morning routine that I would do that wouldn't take so long. So as soon as I wake up, I meditate, right? And like I try to do it for 20 minutes. Some people are like, I don't have time for that. 5 minutes of deep breathing or a guided meditation. There are apps, Calm, Insight Timer, Liberate for Black people. Okay.
Yeah.
And so yes, morning and evening routines is number 2. Just like, gratitude list is another one that's good for morning or evening. And if you have a family, pro tip, if you do every evening, what am I grateful for? Go around with your family. That is a great way to kind of end the day. Okay. Number 3, I mean, I said this earlier, but breathe through the microaggressions. No, do deep belly breaths. When somebody says something to you, I'm going to give you an example of a need for a belly breath. My friend was on a cruise last week. Okay. And she sent me this text. I was like, what? She said this. I was in an elevator and a white woman, she said to me, oh my God, I love your hair. It's so shiny and curly. And I can never get my hair to get that curly. Can I pet it?
Pet.
So my friend took a deep breath. And then she said, no, you may not pet my hair. If you'd like to pet something, you can get a puppy or a kitten. And also, when was the last time you asked a white person if you could pet their hair? And then I was like, so what happened? She was like, that woman turned 50 shades of red. I was like, I mean, right? Okay. So breathing through allows you, because she could have responded in a really angry way, right? She could have done something else, right? But the deep breath allows you to be calm, still get your point across and communicate, but from a calmer place. All right. Number 4. In my book, Black People Breathe, I describe a technique called RAIN. Okay, RAIN is an acronym, and I'm going to tell you what it is. And I did not make this up. This has been around for a while, but only in mindfulness circles. But when I go to mindfulness retreats, I'm the only Black person. So I don't think many Black people know about this. Okay, the R in RAIN is for recognize. Recognize how you're feeling. This is for after something big happens, right? Like when I got harassed by the police, right? That's an example. So if I don't process that, if I don't face it, that's going to get stored in my body. I'm going to be thinking about it. I'm going to be staying up all night. So we need to face the hard things that happen. So RAIN is a way to face it. The R in RAIN is for recognize. Recognize how you're feeling. Name the emotion. I am angry, right? Okay. A is for allow. Now, I don't know about the household that you grew up in, but in my household, there was no feelings. It was sweep it under the rug, keep it moving. We got to go to work. You got to go to school. So this is the opposite of that. A is for allow. Take a moment and allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. Give yourself permission. It is okay to be feeling this way. This situation provoked you to feel this way. That is okay. Allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. The I in RAIN is for investigate. And, the traditional definition of this is investigate, what is the feeling like? But part of that, the part that I kind of get attracted to is, how are you feeling this in the body? Be a detective. I feel this in my shoulders. I feel this in my chest. I have a tight chest, right? Investigate, describe it. And something about that process of describing it separates you from it. It's I am not this emotion. I'm experiencing this thing right now. And then the N in RAIN is for nurture. What can you do to feel better? Sometimes something as simple as taking a hand and placing it on your heart, that can just be calming, right? I also learned of this butterfly technique for trauma, right? Where you cross your hands like this, you cross, your hands, and then you make a butterfly, this, and you're just tapping. And you're just tapping on your chest or on your shoulders or on your arms, depending on what feels good. Yeah. And so you just do that for a few minutes. So what can do you need to call somebody, right? Is there somebody that can make you feel better? Do you need to take a bath? Do you need to take a nap, right? What is it that you need? We're all different. So ask yourself, what do I need to feel better? And that's RAIN. So my number 4 practice is when you experience something big and heavy and emotionally charging, rather than ignore it and sweep it under the rug, practice RAIN. And I have a guided RAIN meditation on my YouTube channel in case anybody wants to try it out. Number 5, I call this Black love as medicine. I'm talking lots about medicine, right? I'm talking a lot, because I'm like, I need something. And also actual medicine is really expensive. And health insurance is like a really, I'm not pleased with the healthcare system and access. And so medicine's expensive. Okay. So Black love though, Black love is not expensive. What do I mean? I mean that when hard stuff happens to you, right? When you experience a microaggression, racism, unfair treatment, discrimination, find your people. There is something so comforting about being around Black people that just get it. They understand and they'll be there for you. They'll give you a hug, and I'm not saying, look, I have a lot of white friends, Asian friends, also Latino. I have lots of friends and they're all loving and they all love me, but they don't understand. They've never experienced it. And there's something powerful about surrounding yourself by people that get it. Because they get you, they understand. So get yourself some Black love as medicine.
These are fantastic tips. I mean, probably some of the best tips that I've heard in a long time, so I think I really like that RAIN acronym. And I feel like it captures so much. And I like the different tips, the Liberate app, which I had heard of, but it is helpful when people are meditating to use a meditation app, because sometimes there's even like guided imagery and things like that could be just so helpful. And then gratefulness when people meet together with their families. It could be another excuse to kind of have your family together at mealtime versus having everybody kind of take their plate and go over wherever they want. So it's, I feel like developing routines and habits and people kind of deciding what works for them. It gives, your tips give people flexibility to kind of to decide what works for them. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, we're all different. We are all beautiful, unique beings that have different needs at different times. And so mindfulness is paying attention in the present moment without judgment to what's happening, to what you're experiencing. And so that's why the flexibility is there, because right now I might need a hug, but in an hour, I might need to just be by myself. Don't talk to me. Right. And so you need to be aware of what is it that you need right now and take up space, take it. I want to leave you with a mantra that has just been so powerful for me. And it is this: today I choose me. Today I choose me. And especially when we're triggered, especially when we've had a hard day, you need to choose you. I know we have lots of responsibilities, especially as a Black woman, and you might feel this too. Like everybody's relying on us. I'm like, when did I ever see? Like, I can't keep take care of it. And then you know what is? I feel like I was like born with the instinct to take care of everybody else and not take care of myself. Maybe it's the role models. I've been really focused on rest recently, and I didn't have any models for rest. I don't know. Did you have models for rest? Did your mother rest?
No, not until recently. I read a book on rest, and it was very interesting. But prior to that, I just had to learn it kind of through the School of Hard Knocks. Kind of like when you kind of push yourself too far and then you realize, oh, this isn't working. I need to stop.
Totally. Been there. Yes. So let's prevent that. That's the point. The point of all of this and these 5 practices that I shared is so that you don't get to the point of burnout. So you don't get to the point where you're like, I can't, it's like, let's just prevent all of that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is just so amazing. So you're on Instagram, Zee Clarke Breathes.
TikTok,
you're
also
on YouTube. The same handle, just Zee
Clarke Breathes on Zee Clarke Breathes on TikTok and Instagram, and then on YouTube it's just Zee Clarke, Zee Zee Clarke. Yeah.
Okay. And then the people can go to Amazon to pre-order your book.
Yeah, or any channels, anywhere books are sold, Barnes and Noble, all the places.
Okay. And then so that is, I think that's amazing. So Black People Breathe, guys, check it out. I'm definitely going to be pre-ordering it. It sounds really fantastic. And it sounds like it's right kind of in the sphere of what's going to help us with our wellness, can help us with just kind of bringing that calmness back to the body so that we can be clear and sharp with our decision making, and we can be more fierce with our advocacy because we're thinking clearly. So I'm really, really pleased with that. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Always excited to get, guests that are doing wonderful things and have a lot of important knowledge to share. Maybe we can kind of pull back from all those kind of accelerated aging and just kind of,
Yes.
that black don't crack,
Yes.
youthful, on the outside and on the inside. Not just on the outside, but also on the inside with our organs to also be youthful.
Mhm. Yes, and yes. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So guys, thank you for listening to Black Mental Health Matters today. Have a great week, and I will talk with you again next week. Bye.
Bye.